Oi oi, it's your boy, the Megan O'Leary of being slightly skeevy, Jack Slack, and it's the Jack Slack podcast, coming at you on Monday the 12th of April. And we're talking about those fights that went on the weekend. There were not too many big ones, but there were lots of fights. We had one on the Wednesday, we had Bellator on the Friday, and we had the UFC on the Saturday. And the UFC on the Saturday was actually sort of like early evening UK time, and I was live tweeting it about 7 or 8 gin and tonics deep. It was good fun. But I did give up after Yusuf versus Allen and went to bed, and then I got up in the morning and it turns out I missed fucking nothing. The Vittori versus Holland fight was not great, but we'll get to that in a bit. Let's start with Wednesday, which was one FC. Or just one C, one championship, not one fighting championship. Legendary esports league, marketing firm, occasional fight company. But they had one on TNT1, and they headlined it with Demetrious Johnson versus Adriano Moraes. We had a little talk about this last time. I'd seen a bit of Moraes. I wasn't super blown away. I thought, if Demetrious Johnson's Demetrious Johnson, probably not going to have an awful lot of trouble. But Adriano Moraes fought the fight of his life. And he sparked Demetrious Johnson in the second round. And it wasn't just fluke, and it wasn't some kind of conspiracy. Well, just to cut off anyone who's coming in, do not comment about how much bigger Adriano Moraes is and how sketchy it is that he makes flyweight. He has made flyweight in one like 12 times. He did it before they changed the hydration rule, which may or may not exist, and he did it after they brought in the hydration testing, which may or may not exist. Yes, one is incredibly sketchy. They do their weigh-ins behind closed doors, and the hydration testing, they've never really proved that it exists. But, counter to all of that, the man in charge of rules and regs, of weigh-ins, of, I think it's athletes and competition, senior vice president of one, man with a huge financial stake in it, Matt Hume, Demetrious Johnson's head coach, Bibiano Fernandez's head coach. There is a massive conflict of interest right at the middle of one, and it goes in Demetrious Johnson's favour. This is not a conspiracy to make him fight big dudes. So while one might be bullshitting with all their with all their weigh-ins and stuff, the fact that they don't have any weight cutting, but Angela Lee can fight at 2 weight classes at the top end of the weight. Bit weird. But the few weigh-ins that they've done semi-public, which are like, ceremonial weigh-ins, which has always been a stupid thing. But front and centre, Matt Hume is in charge of them. He's the guy telling people to come onto the stage, move off, looking at the scale. Like, if you believe that this guy was 50 pounds heavier than Demetrious Johnson or whatever, you believe that Matt Hume knew that and let his number one fighter, the guy who, worships him, fight this guy knowing he was 50 pounds heavier or whatever. Don't believe me? Go look at Matt Hume's LinkedIn. Top line, senior vice president of one. Second line, head coach of Demetrious Johnson. The number of people who don't know that Matt Hume is in charge, or is at least in charge of competition and rules and shit over there, is astounding. If you look up, just Google one weigh-ins or one hydration testing or one rules, the guy explaining all of them is Matt Hume, who apparently decided on them. And if you're like, well, without the hydration testing, blah, 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 Demetrious Johnson doesn't cut a lot of weight, blah, 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 he could be in a smaller weight class. They have a strawweight weight class. He's not in it. He has the choice to go to it at any time. And Joshua Pasio is the champion, so he'd probably win it. But, no, there isn't a conspiracy against Demetrious Johnson here. What happened is, he's been getting slower for a little while. I think he was slowing down by the Henry Cejudo fight. I think Henry Cejudo was coming into his own just at the time that Demetrious Johnson was starting to lose a step. But, when he's been, up against guys like Yuya Wakamatsu, what's his name, Tatsuya Wada, Danny Kingad, guys who are not on the level that he was at. It's not that. Well, yes, I've been really impressed with Adriano Moraes in spurts, but it's not that there's just secretly a whole load of amazing flyweights out there who were better than the guys Demetrious Johnson was fighting in the UFC. It's that he slowed down. You could see that in his fights. And then, in this one, Adriano Moraes, definitely his frame played a part in this. I'm not going to say it didn't, but, Demetrious Johnson, a lot of what he does, for all the technical perfection angle, He's a very technically skilled fighter, but there are still things that he does that rely on being the fastest man in the division, in MMA probably. Like, he goes in on straight lines and he goes back on straight lines. And, leaving on a straight line, generally not advised. Generally, like, a little bit less safe than leaving on, ducking out the side door and then re-establishing range. And he tends to, like, he'll work in with, like, some punches or kicks or whatever, and then he'll do a full step back into the opposite stance and things like that. And that's where Moraes was catching him with, like, low kicks going out. He's a really long dude. Demetrious Johnson is slowing down a bit, so he's just catching his lead leg on the way out. And then you saw Demetrious Johnson was having a really hard time closing on him. So yeah, his frame had a bit of a impact on this, in that Moraes' plan seemed to be to circle off, use the full space of the cage, but he didn't use it as well as he could. Not the cage, I mean his reach. He didn't use his jab a lot, didn't frame on him a lot. Didn't push kick or, straight kick to the front leg. It was mainly sort of like big round kicks and then running. But you really saw Demetrious Johnson having to reach for him. And that's what got him caught on that uppercut. It was a bit of a weird exchange. Well, no, wild exchange. Moraes jumped for a flying knee, which has never worked for him, but he does it in every fight anyway. Demetrious Johnson tried to chase him into the clinch and pursue the takedown or push him to the fence. And it was just that getting caught in the middle. Like, his arms were out touching Moraes, but he wasn't chest to chest. He wasn't on his hips. He was just sort of chasing him, and Moraes hit him with a lovely counter uppercut. But before we even talk about the finish, I thought Moraes was, he's always been a really interesting grappler, and I've been revisiting. I'd only seen, I think it was Kazuki Suzuki. I'd seen him fight, and then one of the ones with Geihei. I can't remember his name. Geijay. The lad from Team Lakai. They traded the title a couple of times, but I'd only seen a few of Adriano Moraes. Revisited his career, really fucking fun grappling, and throughout, like, all his fights, they're going, oh yeah, he's a training partner of Hanayaya. Hanayaya's in his corner, and I'm going, oh, of course, that makes sense. But, like, the first round of this fight, he gets Demetrious Johnson into a kicking match. Demetrious Johnson throws a body kick. Moraes catches it under his arm, starts trying to ragdoll him to the floor, and he meets resistance because, even though he's a bit bigger than Demetrious Johnson's balance has always been wonderful. And so instead of, like, getting him to his back, he just slides in, baseball slides in, attacks the leg. Demetrious Johnson sits to his butt because Moraes starts reaping the leg and attacking a heel hook. So he sits to his butt, and then there was a really weird moment where Demetrious Johnson, if you've got a leg trapped, and the opponent's on it, you tend to rock to the other side, put that hand down on the side that isn't in the footlock, and then do the technical stand-up that way, because then you can put that foot on the ground, the one that's in the footlock. Typically the wrong, quotations wrong way to do it is to, if they're attacking your leg, you put the same side hand down, because then you've got to try and free the leg and stand up in one movement. Again, wrote an article about this, so obviously diagrams in there showing this, but you can just watch this sequence because he tries to stand up and pull his leg free at the same time, and Moraes obviously not going to let it go easy, and he just sort of follows him up and takes him down. So then Johnson spent the rest of the first round underneath this guy, and really couldn't get a lot going. Demetrious Johnson's always impressed me with his butterfly guard and how well he can get up and scramble. Henry Cejudo took him down 3 or 4 times in their second fight, and the whole reason that people don't want to score the takedowns is that Demetrious Johnson immediately got to his hands and knees and got up and ground-beat. But I thought that was really impressive from Moraes, just being like, I want to take him down, he's giving me some resistance, I'll dive in underneath him. Just that level of comfort with the grappling against a guy of that level. Even if he's slowing down a bit, he's still fucking Demetrious Johnson. And he passes guards like a broken turnstile a lot of the time. If you watch him take down like Joey B in their first fight, he takes him down, Joey B moves to like butterfly guard, and he just hops over like instantly. But the knockout came with that uppercut landing. Johnson gets sort of bundled to the floor, and he starts to stand up with the underhook from half guard and the hand to the floor, and on the way up he gets kneed in the chin. And rewatching Moraes' career, he's done this loads. He's very good at timing the get up, which is, hand to the floor, lift your weight up, swing back into stance, the technical stand up, or the Turkish get up. If you do kettlebells or something like that, you'll be familiar with the movement. But I put up a couple of clips on Reddit from Moraes' career of him doing similar sort of things. his first few fights in one, he takes guys down by the fence, like with a double, and then he'll put his butt in the air and drag them off the fence so that they put their hand to the ground and jump up. And against Urashitani, who really like old school guy. Someone was saying he had a trilogy with, or a pair of fights with Mamoru Yamaguchi, which is, he's the Fro, and that is like 15 years ago. So the guy's been around forever. But he was brought into the UFC and for their flyweight tournament, and he got Joey B, lost that fight because it's Joey B in his prime, and then he got John Lineker, and he lost that fight because it's John Lineker. So, and then they cut him. So he's one of those guys where you didn't really get to see the full quality of him in the UFC. But Adriano Moraes dragged him off the fence. The guy put his hand down to get up, and immediately Moraes snatches his neck, and he snatches his neck before he gets the hooks on the back. It was fantastic. It was like Marcelo Garcia versus Vitor Ribeiro back in the day. Get the rear naked choke. Don't give a fuck about the hooks. You can get them in while the guy's desperately trying to fight off the strangle. And then he's similarly against Kazuki. Well, what's his name? Kazushi Suzuki, whatever his name is. He does the same thing that he did against Johnson, but with a soccer kick. He realizes this guy's putting one hand on the floor and he's about to try and stand up, so he just hops up and soccer kicks him in the head. Now, soccer kicks are illegal in one now, and I was actually thinking of doing, I probably still will do, a Filthy Casuals guide to soccer kicks and stomps, because I think there are times when you see a very clever, tricky use of it, like Shogun used to do some really cool ones where he'd like stand over the guy's guard, slap their feet apart and stomp up the middle, and he did that to Ricardo Arona, which is a really big name to be able to do that to, someone with quality ground game like that. But the downside is that most soccer kicks aren't like that. Most soccer kicks that you remember, well, most soccer kicks that work because they're happening against an opponent who's either too gassed or too concussed to defend themselves against them. It really is. I mean, like, if you remember, which was the EA Sports UFC, maybe it was THQ UFC, one of the UFC games, they put in a pride mode, and the only way you could land the soccer kicks was like against someone who was already hurt, and that was astonishingly accurate, because that's basically the only time. Like, when I think of like soccer kicks and stomps, I think of Vanderlei Silva versus Yuki Kondo, already unconscious, basically getting stomped in the head. Iko Hisuminoa just being absolutely gassed against Phil Baroni and getting kicked in the head like 10 times. Most soccer kicks, like 90% of them, happen because the guy can't defend himself. There was a horrible one which caused one to eventually ban them, which was Roger Huerta versus, I can't remember his name, begins with a Z, but it's such a bad one that like Chatri banned the soccer kick and was like, yeah, it just looks really bad. And actually, I agree. That's why you want to ban it. If you're trying to make your sport big and there's dudes just getting mercilessly soccer kicked while they can't defend themselves, it's not a great look. But you can't even find that. You can't even find that fight online now. Most, on like YouTube or most places that you'd normally be able. Well, I mean, one uploads all their fights to YouTube, and yet they have consciously scrubbed YouTube of this fight. So that's how bad that soccer kick was. But yeah, that was Roger Huerta. He'd been like bashed. He was out of it, clearly. He goes for a takedown and like misses and falls to his hands and knees, and he's basically crawling towards the dude. He's not defending himself, and the ref just goes, "Oh, hold on," and then the guy just runs up and punts him in the head like Randy Orton. It was really bad. So soccer kicks, not a huge fan of, but that's a really clean, technical way to catch people with it, coming up from the floor when they got their hand down on that side. The example I used in my article of someone doing that in a non-soccer kicking context is Gegard Mousasi, a regional champion. He took a couple of fights in the UFC at one point, and one of the guys he managed to beat was Thiago Santos. And Santos came up off the floor, and Mousasi stepped up and threw a head kick on the same side that he had his hand down. And even when you're off the floor, that hand has to come from the floor up to your guard. It's got a long way to travel. So that's one of the big... the technical stand-up is supposed to be the best way to get up, as in like self-defense, but also in building up underneath someone. The underhook get-up's still one of the most powerful techniques in MMA. But you can't protect your jaw and head and neck on that side while you're using that hand as a strut on the floor. So Moraes has done it before, and I'm sure he'll do it again, but he did it to Demetrious Johnson perfectly. Johnson went down like he was shot. It was a really nice knee. But then the uppercut before it was really nice, and the entire performance from Moraes was pretty nice. So mad respect to him. Now, there is, I did say last week, you're not going to be like, oh, there's so many great fighters in one's flyweight division who would come over and clean shop in the UFC. You know, there are guys that you should be interested in. Like I said last week, I like Yuya Wakamatsu. He smoked some dude with his right hand the other, it might have been last year, to be honest. Lockdown goes on forever, mate. But, you know, you only have to go down to like number 3 or 4 in the rankings. And you're talking about Danny Kingad. Danny Kingad just fought Demetrious Johnson for this title shot. And, you know, he's had a title shot before. The man cannot grapple. He's a Team Lakai guy, and I don't know how they keep winning, because they make the most bizarrely basic mistakes, but then they'll beat someone like Shinya Aoki, and you're like, what? How does that happen? You know, the fight between Adriano Moraes and Danny Kingad. Moraes was defending his title back in like 2016, 2017. He gets on. Well, Danny Kingad throws a kick, falls over, and can't get up. And Adriano Moraes moves to his back. And Danny Kingad, there's an arm over your shoulder and there's an arm under your shoulder in like the standard backpack seatbelt position. And Danny Kingad is entirely focused on grabbing the bottom arm and pulling it under his armpit and holding it there, while Moraes' top arm is freely moving across his neck and choking him. It's this, like, the guy didn't know what he was doing. It was crazy. But then even like Danny Kingad got the fight with Demetrious Johnson by losing to what's his name? Reese something or other. Australian lad. Grappled all over Danny Kingad, but it was in the Philippines, so they gave him the decision. I mean, I'm slagging off Danny Kingad a lot, but like you don't want people in your division looking like that if you're going to try and sell yourself as like the alternate to the UFC's flyweight division. However, Adriano Moraes, give him a look. Better yet, go read the article, because I talked a load about some of the cool stuff that Moraes has done in his one run. And then the co-main event was Eddie Alvarez versus Yuri Lepicus. And this one was so controversial. He got him down, sat on his legs along the fence, you know, the old Habib, the old lame it out position, as we used to call it. The Habib actually worked from it, so I don't call it that anymore. But he's sitting on the legs, and Yuri Lepicus is pulled in close to him. And Eddie Alvarez gives him like the Cain Velasquez punch in front of your own head thing, where they got their head pressed against you. And the ref goes, back of the head, oh! And then disqualifies him. And Lepicus is like, oh my God, I'm dying. The crazy thing is, you know, one has always been inconsistent in their reffing and their rules and all that sort of shit, which is amazing because Matt Hume's supposed to be in charge of it. But this was pretty bad, because Yuri Lepicus' last fight was a fight for the title against Christian Lee. Christian Lee blasted him in the back of the head. And I put up a little comparison on Reddit, and then I was like, oh, one might actually try and sue me, because they do like threatening to sue people. But yeah, people were going like, oh, actually, Christian Lee's were on the ear or whatever. And you're like, no, they're not. He's blasting him in the back of the head. I mean, Eddie Alvarez's shots were illegal too, but like the inconsistency is incredible. And there's a great clip of Angela Lee. If you watch her fight with Michele Nicolini, Nicolini's coming up like on a single. Angela Lee pushes her down and like limp legs her down to the ankle, turns back into her and drops her knee across the back of Michele Nicolini's neck. And the ref goes, hey, don't do that. And then she hits her in the back of the head a couple more times with hammer fists. And the ref's like, stop it. So, you know, it's like, that's the reason it's banned in boxing and in MMA and stuff. Like, people died and went blind from shots to the back of the head. And yet we treat it like, hey, stop doing that while you're throwing like 3 or 4 while the ref's telling you not to. I would be fine with every shot to the back of the head just being like stood up, to be honest. But then it is a sort of strange area, because I've seen people take the view that like any trying to turn your head away to, you know, hide legal targets and go to the turtle should be considered like an act of cowardice and result in disqualification, because you're forcing that person to not hit you because they might hit the back of your head. Obviously, don't believe that. Huge fan of the turtle and people who play the turtle well. But it is a pickle. You know, it's like boxing. You know, if you like the Philly shell, you know, part of that is that you're legally not allowed to hit the back of the body in boxing. You know, you can't kidney punch. The kidney punch is one of the best options against a good Philly shell player, or Stonewall, or whatever you want to call it, but it is technically illegal. If you watch Canelo try and do it against Floyd Mayweather, Floyd's like, don't do that, and keeps saying to the ref, like, stand on the other side of me so you can see this. So I mean, I really do feel for Eddie here, because this was just a really unfortunate happenstance. I mean, it is kind of like the one against Dustin Poirier, where the ref told him not to do something and he did it anyway, or continued doing it. Like, I was watching Travis Stevens. He was doing a live stream thing. This was like 4 years ago, but I found it like yesterday while I was drunk. And I was watching him like commentate his matches at the 2016 Olympics because I remembered one of the matches he won basically by going to Turtle, doing a sit out, and then coming back in on a single leg, which obviously strange way to win a judo match, but it's just that he has all these options that he can do that aren't standard judo. But in the course of that, he's talking about some guy taking this amazing grip on the inside of his sleeve, which I believe is illegal in judo. It's illegal in BJJ. And he's just saying, but you have to fight the fight. You know, if someone is fouling you or if the ref's calling things against you, you have to just be able to get on with it. Yes, like when you go and write your memoirs afterwards, you can be like, well, I was screwed out of this by this ref or this whatever. But when you're in there, you just gotta play to whatever rules they're deciding in the moment. If the ref's shit, you just have to go with it and hope you can appeal it later, you know? You can't just ignore them and then be like, but he was wrong. But yeah, I mean, you know, Yuri Lapicus went from undefeated prospect to getting smashed easily by Christian Lee. The Christian Lee one is amazing because he gets mounted by Christian Lee, bucks and goes over his own head to do like to attack a leg from the bottom of the mount. And you're like, what a cool move. And then instead of going for like a heel hook or something actually devastating or scrambling to top position, he tries to straight ankle lock him. And you're like, no, you're not going to do that. Yes, people can do straight ankle. Like Shinya Aoki he said he was trying for an open fracture on Tatsuya Kawajiri. You can do some beastly straight ankle locks, but most people are not going to straight ankle lock anyone good in the heat of an MMA fight when that guy can hit him in the head. And that's basically what happened. Christian Lee was just like, before you finish straightening out my leg, I'm just going to start hitting you in the head. I mean, heel hooks are fucking devastating, and you have to get him on and finished before the guy can pound you in the head. You know, Leo Santos is an amazing grappler, but got finished with hammer fists while in position to heel hook a dude. But anyway, that's enough about one. I've given them too much attention. Bellator was a bunch of trash, is how I describe it. Won some money on it because, the full, all in on Coca fell through, but I had a parlay on Liz Carmouche and Kat Zingano. There are, on any Bellator event, there are fights that you're like, yes, that's an obvious layup. And if you just put a couple of those in a parlay, you're normally fine. The last two Bellator events I have won small sums of money on, but I'm doing it to prove a point more than anything. But oh god, funniest thing in the world. A few weeks ago, Bellator got a deal with BBC Three. And I was like, oh no, my license fee is going to Scott Coker. That is the biggest slap in the face of all. And then Prince Philip died, as everyone has been expecting him to for the last 10 years. And the BBC, basically no head royal has died in like 60, 70 years or whatever. How long has Liz been on the throne? We're on first name terms. But it's been a very long time. And we've moved on since, like, BBC's the only broadcaster, and we have to have a week of no colours on the TV. Well, I mean, there wasn't colour TV when she came in, but it's been a while, and like the protocols are so outdated now. Like for the hour after Prince Philip died and they released the news, like Radio 1 was only playing instrumentals of Adele or something. It's like, you can't be too gaudy. Everyone's got to wear a black armband. It's like fucking Victorian times. So this thing came out. It was Bellator Press PR department, and they released like a statement on Twitter, just being like, the BBC Three will not be covering Bellator because of the death of Prince Philip. Oh yeah, no, Prince Philip, he hated fist fights. What did he like? No one really knows. Being racist was his favourite hobby. And hiding his chomo son. But it was just so funny, like watching my enemies trip over each other. The royal family and Bellator inconveniencing each other. Also the BBC, which is just, I mean, aside from like Attenborough and their really good documentaries, and the occasional good drama series, they have become like the party. The propaganda arm of the party. Because, back in, was it like 2016, 2015, whenever, David Cameron changed it so the director of the BBC is appointed by the Prime Minister. So, like, the dude in charge there now is a massive Tory donor. And he's supposed to be like, no, we're very impartial on all things. Then you got all these weird ultra right-wing ghouls who are like, BBC lefty nonsense. You're like, it's literally bought and paid for by the Conservative government. How? Anyway, so Bellator wasn't on the Beeb. You had to watch it through whatever means you normally do, with Russian commentary probably. And it wasn't great. I mean, Lyoto Machida at the age of 55 lanced up Ryan Bader for 2 and a bit rounds, and then got wrestled. I mean, aside from that, fuck all happened. Liz Carmouche boring the girl in the co-main event, no less. Kat Zingano got a submission over some lass who only had 5 fights on her record. Matt, looking down this card, literally nothing interesting happened. Fucking hell. It's Bellator. Like, even before this fight, when you're going, oh, okay, they've got some names on that card, it always turns out shit anyway. Oh, I forgot to mention on one, though. Rugrug Umar Kabe, the massive Senegalese wrestler who was supposed to fight Buchecha, but Buchecha was like, I'm having none of that. He was booked to fight someone in a heavyweight MMA fight 10 hours before that falls apart. So they ask some random kickboxer to come in and fight Rugrug, and he just gets mauled. It was like when they used to, they'd be like, Kung Lee fighting here tonight in Sanshou, and then they'd find someone who'd never done a Sanshou fight. And Kung Lee would just hit them with double legs and singles the entire night, just throwing them on their head. And Scott Coker would be like, yes, finest Sanshou fighter of all time over there. And then the UFC card, Vettori versus Holland, previewed it, no one really cared. But what was interesting on this card? Well, main event wasn't that interesting. Kevin Holland, his takedown defense looked bad again. You know, he can stop a takedown, and then he gets stuck on the fence, and then the second takedown always works. And then he spends so much time like trying to throw up arm bars. And there's a value to the armbar, you know, like Charles Oliveira uses the armbar really well. Barely ever, well, has never armbarred someone from the guard and finished it. He always, like, almost always they will move and he'll come back for the triangle, or he'll roll to his knees and stand up. And Kevin Holland can do that nice roll to the knees and stand up, but most of this fight was just him getting stacked against the fence and beaten up. And then, well, to be honest, he did well in the early going in the first round, striking with Vettori, because, as we said, Vettori was huge against Jack Hermansson. He looked like half a foot shorter here. Really long guy, Kevin Holland, snapping right straights off his head. Vettori was trying to like slip and parry at the same time and then come back with his left hand, as he often does, and he was having real trouble with it early on. But as the fight progressed and Holland slowed down, you know, Holland would land the right straight and then he'd get hit with the left in return anyway. But most of the fight was just Vettori getting the clinch, pursuing the takedown, taking him down. There was a really nice moment in round 2, I think it was, where Vettori moved to half guard and Holland did like a full roll over the top into the top position. And that was something that Roger Gracie used to be really good at. He had a really nice sweep where he basically rolled back over his shoulders from half guard and rolled on top of you. And if you ever watched the... I mean, he was really good at it in the gi because he used to get that... Is it the Georgian grip where you go over the back and get the belt? And he'd do it that way while holding the arm. But in no-gi, he would just sort of like spin into it and see what happened. And there's a great rolling session with him and GSP on YouTube where he does it to GSP. One thing that really made me laugh in this one, like, he used the lead leg sidekick really well to the lead leg of Vettori early on. Holland, this is. And then... and the odd sidekick to the body too, and then he picked his knee up to stamp down on Vettori's foot. And as he picked his knee up, Vettori also picked up his lead leg, because he'd been dealing with low kicks and sidekicks to the knee. And Holland like watched him do it and then stomped where his foot had been anyway. It was because it's such a slow move, and Vettori immediately moved in and hit him off it. Like stomping on people's lead feet. I mean, we talked about this the other week when someone said how viable is standing on people's lead feet as a tactic. Because in boxing, if you can stand on someone's lead foot and hit them, they will probably fall over because they just like they'll be trying to move or lean or do whatever and change their balance, and you're standing on their lead foot. The problem is that people's lead foot moves more than any other part of their body. You know, like head movement takes discipline to do, but if you're moving your head, you're much harder to hit. Your lead foot is always moving anyway on its own. So like, you know, it's very tricky to try and stand on someone's lead foot, and even trickier to try and stamp on someone's lead foot. So while it is a cool looking move, I do not anticipate that catching on or being very successful at all, to be honest. There's a reason that people do it along the fence, when guys are like rooted to the floor and driving off it. But I mean, game performance from Kevin Holland. I wasn't super stoked about this fight, but I'm not going to give in to I'm not going to give out to Holland. I thought he did, he really reined it in. He wasn't, playing to the cameras as much as he was in that Brunson one, and you couldn't have expected him to come in here and wrestle better. It's like it was like 2-3 weeks ago that this massive weakness was demonstrated to the world. I mean, Thiago Santos got him down pretty easy, and a couple of other guys have, but you're not going to be able to change that in 3 weeks. He could make a really good faith effort at getting better at wrestling and getting up from the bottom and not wasting so much time on the bottom. But that was never going to happen before this fight happened, and Marvin's been looking really strong from top position for a long time. It was really funny watching Marvin Vettori lose his mind over the cup shot in the first sort of minute of the fight. I was thinking, we didn't talk about this last week. I was just sort of focused on the fight, but the more I thought about it afterwards, I was like, Kevin Holland could really piss him off, and pissing him off might make him make some glaring mistakes. You don't really see people who who show their emotions as much in a fight as Marvin Vettori. And outside of the fight, he lost his Kevin. What was it? Carl Robertson either got COVID or missed weight or something like that, and Marvin Vettori was trying to fight him in the lobby. It's like, no, we're not getting paid for this, but I'm still going to fight you. And they didn't really have bad blood coming into that fight. I don't think it was just he wanted to fight him because he gypped him out of a fight. But really, if you're fighting Marvin Vettori at this point, you got to be trying to give him every small annoying foul you can get away with, because he was so indignant that someone might accidentally kick him in the groin, as probably happens a lot in sparring and in actual fights to him. If you could just do the small fouls that the referees won't catch, like a little bit grabbing the finger, inside the glove, grabbing the shorts, get butterfly guard and use the Gary Goodridge, just putting your toes inside their cup, man would lose his mind. Rest of this card, who stood out? Mike Perry versus Daniel. Actually, Daniel Rodriguez did look good in this fight. Mike Perry had trouble with southpaws in the past, had a lot of trouble with, is it Danny Roberts? English lad? Southpaw. Basically, Mike Perry would get blasted with left straight and then swing back, and Danny, whoever he was, hung around too long. But the left straight was just, Perry couldn't see it coming. And you saw that here with Daniel Rodriguez, he just couldn't deal with the left straight at all. Flattened out Mike Perry's face even more. And Perry just looked awful here. The way he was moving, even. He looked like BJ Penn when he went down to Nova Unao and tried to be Henan Barao. You remember he came out doing the weird tippy toes stance, just doing nothing that he'd actually done to that point to be a great fighter. There is definitely, some people make massive changes in their game and it does pay off, but Mike Perry, just every fight he looks different because he's never training with a coach anymore, or changing coach every other week. Honestly, I was very impressed with him after the Ellenberger fight, and I was like, man, potential, but honestly, get him out of the UFC now. He's more trouble than he's worth. He's gonna do something stupid at some point. He's clearly erratic in his behavior. But then, maybe the meme appeal does bring people in. Julian Marquez versus Sam Alvey was just a disaster of a fight. Sam Alvey, he's going to stand on the fence and try and clip you with right hooks when you step in. Julian Marquez seemed to have, the one punch he didn't train for was the one punch that Sam Alvey throws. So he keeps coming in and getting caught by it. And my boy Zach Makovsky, he was tweeting me looking forward to moving to Texas and eating entirely elk jack. It did look pretty sketchy there for a minute. But then he caught him with, was it a right straight? Can't remember, but he caught Alvey and got a rear naked choke without the hooks in, as we talked about. Love that. Actually, while we're on the subject, Ryan Hall has been putting out great instructionals recently, just to bridge the gap between his fights, because he doesn't, there's always something going wrong, either on his end or someone else's. It's quite sad that we don't get to see Ryan as much as I would like to, but he's been putting out some great instructional material, and his recent one on the back in MMA, fascinating stuff, stuff that works, but is also different to a lot of the stuff that I've seen that also works. It's nice to see different approaches to things, and he's really big on the Merkel at the moment, which is like a bulldog but with the arm in. So if you, BJJ Scout was talking about it a couple of years ago because it's quite common in wrestling now. Imagine you've got the seatbelt grip from the back of someone, but you don't have your hooks in, and you walk around to the same side so that it's like a bulldog. And that's the Merkel. And it was really interesting watching Jordan Griffin do that to Luis Saldana on the undercard. He did that like 2 or 3 times, got him in the Merkel. Didn't really do much from it. I think it'd be a very interesting position if you allowed knees to the head on the ground, because you could just drive them down on the arm you've got trapped, keep them on their hands, and then every time they try and push up off the floor or build up into base, you just sneak your far knee around and hit him in the head. You can like pick up crucifixes from there. You can use the bulldog choke from there, but you can also roll into back takes and things, and that's what Ryan Hall's recent instructional stuff has been about. And it just looked like a really interesting position. There's so many cool things I've seen in lockdown that I'm like, can't wait to get back to training. And then I'm going to get back to training and realize that I've forgotten how to play fucking half guard or something. It's been like a year and a half since I've been able to actually roll with people. But yeah, bulldog choke in this one, Merkel in the earlier one, really cool. That Saldana Griffin fight was very strange, because I came in a minute and a half into that. I had been drinking with friends, because you can finally fucking see friends outside now. So I've been drinking, came in, saw that the fights were on, clicked it on. Luis Saldana, it was like a minute and a half into the first round, and this dude was gassed as shit. And I'm going, oh, that's an adrenaline dump. He's not doing well here. And I just, through the whole fight, I was like, this is a disastrous performance from Saldana. Finally sort of picked it up in the last round, where Griffin sort of slowed down to even with him. And I must have missed like a minute and a half of Saldana doing good stuff in the first round, because he got the decision. And I was going, that's weird. Jack Shaw versus Hunter Azure was, or Azure rather, was fun. I thought it wasn't quite as fun as I expected, but it was interesting because Azure can wrestle, and his striking's sort of coming along, but he's sort of a middle of the pack guy. Shaw can wrestle, but like shouldn't be able to wrestle. You know, he's Welsh and he wrestles really well, but he was made to work for this one. And if you're like, Jack Shaw's going to go straight to the top with no resistance, this one's always going to be a little bit of things like this are going to be a bump in the road for you. But be interesting to see what he can do from here. His jab looked really sharp. To be honest, I've always liked Shaw's striking. I don't know why I've never done anything about him. It might be because we haven't seen him in a little while. But yeah, interesting chap. He's like Brad Pickett, you know, like, oh, I'm fighting a Welshman. Oh, fuck, he can wrestle. Except Brad Pickett's English. But, you know, it's interesting because it's a different game. Like, while if you're the best freestyle or folk style wrestler in the world, that's a tremendous advantage coming into MMA. But cage wrestling is what MMA is. Like 90% of MMA wrestling is cage wrestling, and being able to keep people down or stand up or break away from the fence. And that, you know, all the freestyle, folk style experience in the world doesn't prepare you for that. That's a new skill you have to learn. Jorgen De Castro, every time he comes on, I'm like, fuck this, do not care. But he went after Danio and he just walked onto a right hand. It was basically Arlovsky versus Buentello. Really bad knockout, but cool nonetheless. Joe Selecki versus Jim Miller was interesting because, like, how big is Charles Oliveira now? I just cannot get the image of him lifting Jim Miller like a child out of my mind. And Charles Oliveira, like, a couple of his like most notable losses were when he went down to featherweight and gassed out. And like now, looking back, it used to be like, oh well, Charles Oliveira just loses whenever he meets someone good. But actually, he was a lightweight. He went down to featherweight thinking, oh yeah, I'll have a big advantage over guys down there. And he was fucking huge. And now he's come back up to lightweight, and there's no way he can make featherweight again. It's just, when you look back, you're like, what a stupid decision it was to just starve yourself and try and make featherweight. But Selecki just looked the same size as Miller here, which was interesting. You know, lots of just sort of playing from the top in closed guard. Wasn't the most impressive victory in the world, especially with how hot I was feeling on Selecki after that Austin Hubbard win. But, you know, these things happen. Got the win, did what he needed to do, got a name on the record. Did not see myself being so impressed by Mackenzie Dern in this one. Came out, looked really in control in the striking. You know, Nina Nunes, last week I was calling her Nina Ansarov. I think it was basically announced this week that she's Nina Nunes now. But Nina Nunes, part of the love story between her and Amanda Nunes is that they sparred together, and Amanda Nunes was impressed with how well she was handling being hit in the face. But yeah, Mackenzie Dern backed her up, put her on her heels, did really good work. Looked very comfortable striking. We did say her jab has looked good for the last, well, no, in the last one, not even the last two. But she's really coming along. I was really impressed. Got the takedown, moved to the armbar, broke the grip beautifully. just looked a cut above Nunes. And like Nunes hasn't done amazing things in the UFC, but she's pretty well regarded. So good work, Mackenzie Dern. I did not see myself being that impressed. While we're on the subject, I mean, I did slag off the Venom gear as unimaginative, but I've got to say, quite like the shorts in this one. Sorry, that's everyone was saying that on Twitter. Just you got to get your lecherous jokes in occasionally. I got a couple of tweets being like, "Sing the song, Jack." I'm not going to do it. I'm saving it. I'm saving it for the Betchko Hair return tour. Then your co-main was Arnold Allen versus Sadiq Youssef, which was the one I was really hot on. Came out well. It was a weird little fight. I mean, Youssef was moving forward and acting the aggressor for most of the fight. Outlanded Allen at a good clip, but Allen had two big moments where he really hurts Sadiq Youssef. So, yeah, always weird when those ones go to the cards, because you know, if you only look at the stats after the fight, you'd be like, oh, well, how did that happen? But I will say Allen looked surprisingly powerful in this one. Because we said last week we've sort of only seen him against old dudes like Gilbert Melendez and Nick Lentz going back to like 2-3 years ago. But I watched a load of his early UFC fights and he was a sloppy, like walking with his strikes mess in his first few. He looked so tight and composed in this one. Because basically Youssef was walking him down, kicking the back leg, which I really liked. But every time he did it, the left straight would come back from Allen. I'm going, oh no, it's risky stuff, risky stuff. Yeah, it was really good. It was just sort of like high stakes striking stuff. Youssef was trying to walk him down and get the counter shots off. Allen was again, like we said, trying to use the kicks and the clinches, and then caught him with a couple of punches by surprise every now and again. I think there was a high kick hurt Youssef at one point. But really, at the end of this fight, I was just like, come on, lads. This could have been 5 rounds. Like, now we're doing random 5-round co-main events. Just, if it's between two top 15 lads in one of the good divisions, and we all know what the good divisions are. You know, you don't have to say it out loud. But if it's in one of the good divisions and you've got 2 top 15 lads, just make it 5 rounds. But one of those fights where you don't feel like, Sadiq Youssef lost the fight, you don't feel like his stock dropped a lot. And Allen won the fight, but you don't feel like he ran away with the fight. You know, that was a good test of him. So, interesting to see where both go next. And then there was someone I wanted to talk about. Mattis Gamrot. That was it. We said last week, sort of on the rough end of a split decision in his first UFC fight. Obviously not like KSW champion, but nobody was going like, oh, KSW champion, he'll walk through this division because it's 155 pounds. You're not gonna. But he looked really good here. And I was really impressed with Gamrot in this fight. I said he had a really good grappling match at ADCC against Gary Tonin. He lost that match because Gary Tonin, obviously one of the best grapplers in the world. But in this fight, Gamrot used his jab really well. Like he did the half jab into full jab, which we always love. You know, where you stop your jab halfway and then you take a beat and then you push it out the rest of the way. He was moving side to side, like making lots of turning of Holtzman. And then when he went for takedowns, he was doing everything I like. He was going for low singles, but the really old-fashioned low single. When people say low single now, they assume like, you can do a sweep single and go into like the back of the knee. You can do the John Smith sort of low single where you have your head inside their knee. But the really old school low single is where you go, say we're both left leg forward, you dive down for the leg and you put your left shoulder inside their knee, grip your hands behind their ankle or foot or whatever, and you drive your left shoulder in so that their knee buckles outwards or straight back. And it's something that Billy Robinson used to teach and talk about. And apparently when he was wrestling some Swedish champion, he put his knee through, like he inverted his knee doing it. But it was Kazushi Sakuraba's go-to takedown, like that low single with the shoulder inside. And it was just so cool seeing someone do it in MMA again. Kazushi Sakuraba did it 20 years ago, and barely anyone's done it since. Habib used to go for the odd low single, and to be honest, I really appreciated that. But even guys who are like known for low singles in wrestling or grappling don't really go for them in MMA. And Mattis Gamrot was going for low singles, and he'd come up, he'd go for the low single with the shoulder inside, and if you couldn't get him down, he'd come up on the high crotch, and then he'd go for the to run the pipe or dump him with the high crotch and come back with the double leg. The takedowns were so flowing in this. It was really nice. And then he had him reacting to takedowns, turning, looking at the jab, and he just caught him leaning. Like Holtzman slipped as if he was going to avoid a jab, and then his head was just still where it was, and the right hand came in immediately afterwards. Gamrot scored the knockout. But yeah, the whole performance from Gamrot here was really nice. I mean, if he keeps doing stuff like that, I'm really looking forward to doing some kind of like Filthy Casuals guide about him or something. And I really like that low single. You don't see it very often, but I think it's got that same value as the high crotch. Your head's going outside of the opponent's body, you're taking it away from the counter knee, from the counter uppercut. There's the danger of things like the crucifix. I mean, the guillotine's not really a threat on the low single. If you watch Jake Shields in Strikeforce, a lot of the time he'd go from the high crotch to like really low down the leg. He'd have his ear on like the outside of the opponent's knee. But yeah, bang-in fight. Anyway, that'll probably do us for today. We're going to be back later in the week to talk about the upcoming Bellator and UFC events. You've got Nemkov fighting this weekend. I suppose I better talk about Nemkov. He's good. We don't get to talk about him a lot. You got Bobby Knuckles versus Gastelum, which was booked a long time ago when we talked about it, but it didn't happen. And then you've got like a weird rest of the card where you've got Andrei Arlovsky versus Chase Sherman, Drakkar Klose versus Jeremy Stevens. What is going on with this card? Abdul Razak Al Hassan is going to fight a guy with 5 fights on his record. Just bizarre. Ricardo Ramos is on the card. He's going to do the fucking, what's it called? Ratazengo, the stupid across your feet kick that does nothing. And he did it like 100 times in his last fight and never did anything with it. Yeah, it'll be fun. Oh, actually, no, hang on. We do have Alexander Romanov versus Juan Espino for Chunky Lad Wrestler. Chonked up grappler is what we're going to call that of the year. But anyway, if you want to read, if you want to support the podcast, get in on the extra stuff we do for the patrons, and read the article about Adriano Moraes, the man who finally caught the mouse, become a Patreon boy, support the podcast. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Kevin Holland's adventures in Dagestan bless.